Hello, my name is Cherri. I'm a Lebanese artist living in Paris. I was invited in 2020 to be the artist in residence at the National Gallery. During my research, the archives of the National Gallery, I came across some accounts of attacks or vandalism that happened within the space of the museum on paintings, and I was interested in this eruption of violence within the space of the museum. So I started investigating more into these occurrences and to look in a way at the museum as a political site of protest, because some of these attacks were done in order to highlight or give more attention to a political cause. Through this project, I decided to create 5 cabinets, something that resembles the curiosity cabinet. Each cabinet is dedicated to one of the paintings that was under attack, that was subject to violence, where you get my own interpretation of these paintings. So the title of the exhibition is "If You Prick Us, Do We Not Bleed?" Of course, it's a title from Shakespeare, Merchant of Venice. And I was interested in putting this in the voice of the paintings, where they become bleeding, living beings. Because one of the things during my research and the accounts of the attacks against these paintings in the press, most of the time the paintings were described like human beings that were under attack. In the case of the Rockaby Venus, the press was talking about the bruises and the wounds of Venus, and talking about the conservators as being surgeons trying to attend to the bleeding body of Venus. So there is something about violence that transforms these paintings into living skin. So here we're standing next to the cabinet that is done after Leonardo's cartoon, the Burlington cartoon. The drawing actually was subject to a gunshot. Someone walked into the National Gallery and shot at the painting. So what we see here is actually an enlargement, 600% enlargement of the impact of the bullet, where it's placed centrally, and next to it we have newspapers dating from the day of the attack, it was in July 1987, because I wanted to place this attack in a historical moment of what was happening on that day, what was happening in England, what was happening in the world on the day that this person decided to walk into the National Gallery with a gun and shoot at a painting. So for me, this incident, although it could be the act of lone wolf who decided by himself to do this gesture, it still echoes the time that we're living in. On top of the newspapers, we have a copy of John Berger's book, Ways of Seeing, which is like the Bible for artists. When we start getting introduced to looking or like thinking about art, it's actually one of the books that changes our perception and changes the way we look. We have this small sculpture, I call it the all-seeing eye. It's made from these glass prosthetic eyes from the 19th century. So these eyes constitute this kind of like this pyramid of eyes that make us feel that we are being looked at and we're not the ones that are just looking. So this bullet impact also becomes something like an icon, like a sun, also like an eye, where in a way this trauma becomes something that we hold high as a lived experience. So this cabinet is after Barocci's Madonna and the Cat. This painting was also vandalized in the National Gallery. And in this painting, I was interested in the hand gestures. We see the Madonna opening her hand to Saint Baptist, who is holding the goldfinch, either telling him to release the bird or to pay attention because there's the cat that's trying to attack the bird. So there's a whole language happening with gestures of the hand. The goldfinch in the Christian iconography, it is said that the black dot on its head came from a drop of blood from Jesus on the cross that fell on the bird's head. And actually it's this drop of blood that gives the specificity of the goldfinch and give it its beauty. So it's also in a way a metaphor of how pain could be transformed into something beautiful. So in this cabinet we see this oversized classic hand in white porcelain. On top of the bird, we don't know if it's trapping the bird, is it it pressing on it? Is it holding it? Or is it caring for a bird that fell and needs to be taken care of? So there is this duality between some sort of violence, but also some sort of gesture of care. And I think it also speaks of the dialogue that's happening within the painting, but also of the care that conservators usually have towards paintings that have been subject to violence. So here we're in front of the cabinet of Rockaby Venus, the Velázquez painting. Velázquez, when he drew the Rockaby Venus, he portrayed a very classic subject, which is the toilet of Venus, in a very modern way. She's giving us her back, she's naked, and she's looking at herself in the mirror. Velázquez places the mirror in the center of the painting, in a way empowering this female figure. Like she doesn't need us, she's like self-sufficient, and we become like these intruders, or like sneaking on Venus and looking at her face through this mirror. He drew the face in a very hazy, very out of focus way, saying that we will not have access to really see who Venus is. The Rockaby Venus was attacked with a knife and with different cuts on the painting. I wanted to portray this painting through this wooden sculpture. It is inspired from a very small Venus that was found in Germany, a 45,000-year-old fetish that is also called a Venus. I mean, the archaeologists decided also to call it a Venus, with a scarification, and probably it was a fertility figure. So the wooden sculpture is inspired from this ancient figure, and next to it there is this classic marble head with the face down on a mirror, but also when we look at the mirror, we see that the Venus has an eye, and this eye is also looking at us. So again, we have this whole play of the return of the gaze, where Venus also becomes like the looking subject, but also the whole painting goes back to a more archaic or primitive form, commenting in a way that what violence does to this modern subject is it returns to something much more archaic and primordial. So here we're in front of the cabinet related to Rembrandt's self-portrait at the age of 63. This painting was attacked by spray paint at the National Gallery. So Rembrandt did several portraits throughout his career, and this is the last self-portrait he made. And it was a bit different from the rest of the self-portraits, where he portrayed himself as an aging man. The texture of the wrinkles, commenting that he's no longer, this very powerful, famous figure, but really like he's more vulnerable, more at the end of his life, but like giving more humanity to his self-portrait. So the way I wanted to comment on this painting is by recreating like a 3D sculpture, like a sort of a shrunken head of Rembrandt, imagining what the rest of the head would look like outside of the space of the painting, using this wax to create this sculpture, which is of course a very soft and malleable but also fragile material. So this whole head is hanging within this sort of a cage, so it doubles the cage of the cabinet, like a double cage. The way the head is suspended, it seems like someone that's been hung, giving it something more of loneliness or something, like quite entrapped, let's say, within these cages. Here we're next to the cabinet of the Adoration of the Golden Calf by Poussin. In this cabinet, I was taking some element, like a detail from the painting, which is the plinth, and having my own interpretation of it. So what we see here in this bas-relief are figures taken from Poussin's painting that have recreated. Of course, Poussin, we know for his figures, he was inspired from bas-relief, from Roman and Greek sculptures. So he was taken, like being inspired from sculpture into painting, and I wanted to go back from the painting back to the bas-relief or the sculpture. So these dancing figures all around the plinth with this lid, a gold leaf lid, and on top of it there is this lamp, which is taxidermy lamp from 1930 that was born like this, that probably lived a few months before it died, and it was taxidermied. So it's two-headed, eight-legged lamp, sort of a monstrous figure of the animal. Commenting on this occurrence of violence against the painting, what it does is bring out a monstrous version or the monstrous figure of the painting, like something in the etymological sense of the monster is something that doesn't resemble itself anymore.